Hi viewers, L hope you are fine. The day my grandmother disappeared from her own house, my mother acted like nothing had happened. I still remember standing in the kitchen, holding a grocery bag in my hands while my mother calmly stirred sugar into her tea. Where's Grandma? I asked. She's staying with Aunt Linda for a while, she replied without even looking at me. Something about her voice felt cold. Practiced. My grandmother, Eleanor Brooks, had lived in that little white house for over 40 years. Every inch of it carried memories. The wooden swing Grandpa built before he passed away. The tiny garden she watered every morning. The faded blue curtains she refused to replace because Grandpa picked them himself. That house wasn't just a building. It was her entire life. And somehow, the silence inside it felt wrong. I drove there that evening after work. The moment I turned onto Maple Street, my stomach dropped. A giant sold sign stood in the front yard. I slammed on the brakes so hard my coffee spilled all over my lap. No, I whispered. Two strangers were carrying boxes through Grandma's front door. I jumped out of the car and ran toward them. Excuse me, what's happening here? One of them looked confused. We bought the property last week. My chest tightened. That's impossible. My grandmother lives here. The man hesitated before quietly saying, "Not anymore." I felt like the ground disappeared beneath me. I called my mother immediately. "You sold Grandma's house?" I shouted. Mom sighed dramatically. "Lower your voice, Amelia. We did what was necessary." Necessary. That word shattered something inside me. "You had no right." "She's old," my father interrupted after grabbing the phone. "She can't take care of herself anymore." The house was falling apart. "No," I whispered. "You wanted the money." Silence. That silence told me everything. A few months earlier, Dad had lost money in some failed business deal. My parents were drowning in debt, but instead of fixing their mistakes, they looked at Grandma's house like it was a rescue boat, and they sold it behind her back. I drove all night trying to find Grandma. Neither of my parents would tell me where she was. By morning, I finally reached Aunt Linda's house. Grandma opened the door slowly. But she wasn't crying. She wasn't angry. She was smiling. That terrified me more than tears ever could. "I've been waiting for you," she said softly. I hugged her tightly. "Grandma, they sold your house." "I know." "You know?" She gently patted my hand and walked toward the living room. Then she opened a small wooden box sitting on the table. Inside were documents. Legal documents. And when I read the first page, my entire world stopped, because months before my parents sold that house, Grandma had already outsmarted them all. I stared at the papers in complete shock. The house no longer belonged to Grandma. Not legally. Months earlier, she had transferred ownership into a private family trust. And the sole beneficiary listed on the documents was me. My hands trembled. "Grandma, what is this?" She looked tired as she sat down beside me. "Your parents thought I was weak," she said quietly. "But old age teaches you to recognize greed faster than youth ever will." Apparently, she noticed changes months ago. My parents suddenly started visiting more often. Dad insisted on helping with bills. Mom kept asking strange questions about property taxes and ownership papers. At first Grandma ignored it. Until one evening she overheard them talking in the hallway. "She probably won't live much longer anyway," my father had whispered. I felt sick hearing those words. Grandma smiled sadly. That was the night I realized they weren't waiting for my love anymore. They were waiting for my house. So she made a decision. Without telling anyone, she met with a lawyer and protected everything. The house, her savings, even Grandpa's antique collection. Everything was locked inside the trust. And my parents never knew. "But if the house belonged to the trust," I asked, confused, "how did they sell it?" Grandma's eyes darkened slightly. "They forged my signature." My heart nearly stopped. "They thought I wouldn't notice until it was too late." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own parents had committed fraud against an 82-year-old woman. And somehow, it got worse. Grandma explained that after the sale, they planned to move her quietly into a small care facility outside town. Cheap, isolated, hidden away from everyone, like she was a problem they needed to erase. I cried that night harder than I had in years. Not just because of what they did to Grandma, but because I finally saw the truth about the people who raised me. The next morning, Grandma surprised me again. "We're going to court," she said calmly. I blinked. "You want to fight them?" "No," she replied. "I want the truth exposed." Over the next few weeks, everything exploded. The buyers of the house were furious when they discovered the sale was illegal. Lawyers became involved immediately. The forged signatures were examined by investigators. And little by little, my parents' perfect image started collapsing. Dad kept calling me nonstop. "Amelia, listen to me." "No," I snapped one night. "You tried to steal from your own mother. You don't understand the pressure we were under. We were drowning." Mom cried during another call. "We had no choice." But they did have a choice. They could have asked for help. They could have worked harder. Instead, they chose betrayal. Meanwhile, Grandma stayed strangely calm through all of it. Every evening we sat together on Aunt Linda's porch drinking tea while the sunset painted the sky orange. "You know what hurts most?" she asked me softly one night. "I would have given them everything willingly, if they had simply loved me honestly." That sentence broke me completely. Because it was true. Grandma wasn't protecting money, she was protecting her dignity. And for the first time in my life, I realized strength doesn't always scream. Sometimes, it sits quietly in a rocking chair, waiting for justice. But what I didn't know then was that Grandma had one final surprise waiting for all of us. And it would change our family forever. The court hearing lasted less than 2 hours. That was all it took to destroy years of lies. The handwriting expert confirmed the signatures were forged. Bank records showed my parents secretly transferred large portions of the sale money into their personal accounts days before Grandma even agreed to sell the house. The judge looked furious. I'll never forget the expression on my father's face when the ruling came down. The sale was declared completely invalid. The buyers would receive compensation through legal insurance. And my parents were ordered to repay every dollar they took. But the real punishment wasn't financial. It was public. Friends stopped calling them. Neighbors whispered whenever they walked outside. Family members cut ties almost overnight. The people who once pretended to care about appearances suddenly had nothing left to hide behind. And through all of it, Grandma never celebrated. That surprised me the most. One evening after court, I found her standing outside the old house. The sold sign was gone now. The windows glowed softly in the evening light. "You won," I told her. She shook her head slowly. "No, Amelia. Families don't win when love turns into greed." Tears filled my eyes. A month later, Grandma gathered everyone for one final meeting. Even my parents came. Dad looked exhausted, older somehow. Mom barely lifted her eyes from the floor. Grandma sat calmly in Grandpa's old chair and unfolded a letter. "I spent months thinking about what kind of legacy I wanted to leave behind," she said. The room fell silent. Money disappears. Houses fall apart. But character follows people forever. Then she revealed her final decision. The house would eventually become a community home for elderly widows who had nowhere else to go. Not for family profit, not for inheritance battles, but for kindness. My parents looked stunned, and honestly, I think that hurt them more than losing the money. Because Grandma turned their greed into something beautiful. Something meaningful. A few weeks later, Dad came to see me alone. For the first time in my life, he cried. "I destroyed everything," he whispered. I didn't know what to say. Part of me still loved him. But another part of me would never forget what he did. Healing doesn't happen in one moment. Sometimes it takes years. Sometimes it never fully comes. But Grandma taught me something important before she passed away peacefully the following winter. She held my hand and smiled softly. "Never let bitterness become your home," she told me. "Otherwise, you become just like the people who hurt you." After her funeral, I sat alone on the porch swing Grandpa built decades ago. The same swing that survived betrayal, lies, and heartbreak. The wind moved gently through the trees as I looked at the house she fought so hard to protect. And for the first time in months,